Analyzing Miguel O'Hara. To continue with the theme of Spider-Man across the Spiderverse, I was requested to analyze one of the characters that created the most impact in the whole franchise, Miguel O'Hara. In this series we analyze the most important characteristics of a character so you learn how to draw it. If you're not so interested in the analysis and you prefer to see me drawing Miguel, I'm going to be drawing him in the right side of the screen. Before starting, let's take a look to the proportions in his body. As reference, we will take the proportion of 8 heads. His torso is well proportioned in base to the measurement of his head, although his pelvis measurement is a little bit short. His pelvis should rest on the 4th line. His legs are equally sized or even shorter than the side of his torso and head together. Which is normal for traditional superheroes who want to emphasize the size of his torso, giving us the traditional shape of a muscular man. His torso creates a kind of inverted triangle shape expected for this kind of characters. His chest, along with his shoulders, create an octagon shape. All of this gives that his whole body is something similar to a T shape. We will start by analyzing his face. The first thing to notice is that his skull is more an oval than a circle, or better said, an elongated circle vertically. His jaw is very squared and his chin is very broad. Putting a grid over his face, I can create some measurement on it. If I divide in half the oval of his skull vertically, it means one part up and one part down, the line in the center is going to cross over his eyes or over his top eyelid. I'm taking his right eye, it means the one we see in the left, as reference. His proportions are 1 by 1 by 0.66. In this grid, this means 3 squares by 3 squares by 2 squares for the jaw. Yes, I know, I need to standardize measure units. Some useful measurements. I divide in 3 parts the square in the middle of his eyes to find the width of his nose in that part. I do the same in the square in between his nose and mouth. In that way, I'm going to find the lower part of his nose and the top part of his top lip. And then I do the same in the next square to find the lower part of the lower lip and the little line that divides the skin of his mouth and his chin. His hairline takes the last space in his skull. Let's keep in mind that his chin is basically the same width as his mouth. His eyes are around 1 space width, but the space in between them is around 1 space and a half. We noted that his nose in the area of the nostrils is also about 1 square and a half width. And his mouth a little wider, about 2 squares wide. His eyebrows take around 2 spaces wide and around 2/4 of the space above his eye. There is a wide use of straight shapes over all his face, with the triangle as the shape that stands out the most. His ears are around 2 spaces tall, going from the top part of his eye to the lower part of his nose, always playing with perspective. His neck is pretty thick and tall, about 2 spaces tall, and we see how all the muscles in his neck show up very much. His face is basically a very elongated and quite deformed hexagon, and it is very clear how his face is made up by triangles and rectangles. In the side view, we can see how his cranium is a quite elongated circle, or also not a very long oval. Approximately 1/3 for his cranium and 2/3 for his face. When dividing his cranium with a horizontal line, we can see how this line passes through his top eyelid. The distance between his eye and his nose is bigger than the side of the eye in this perspective. His eyebrow reaches almost the middle of the space for his face. Here I highlighted the shape of his ear and his hairline. We can see how the side of his nose follows the shape of the circle of the cranium. The lower line of his nose and his lips reach all the way to the front line in his face. This line that goes from the intersection of the skull all the way to his jaw shows us the side of his face. If we search enough, we can find different guidelines and shapes in the face. Like that square shape of his lips, or that square shape that forms the shadow of his eyes. Similar to the front view, we can see how the cranium is a circle that passes through his mouth. I divide this circle with a line that crosses his top eyelids and his ear. I also draw the line the side of his skull where his jaw starts. These lines divide the front and the side of his face. And we do the same with this circle in his cranium to divide the front and the side of his face. We can even see that circle shape in the edge of his face. Now I will simply trace all the most important lines in his face. I will use very simple shapes so you can follow them more easily. Whenever necessary, I will leave a card with additional information. I hope this analysis was useful for you and that you can draw this character that is so interesting. Remember to like it, to subscribe, but most importantly share it with someone who can find this content useful. See you in the next video. Adiós.